Alright, what's going on everyone? Welcome back to another video. So we've got quite a lot happen in the last 24 hours, and although Bitcoin hasn't made any huge moves, there's definitely been some more important developments that have actually happened and that you should be actually aware. So today we're going to be covering what's happening with Bitcoin, why the market has slowed down slightly, the latest updates surrounding Michael Saylor's strategy, and the ongoing US-Iran situation that's been affecting financial markets. And then finally, I'll give you guys my thoughts on where I think Bitcoin could be heading next. So if that sounds good, then let's get straight into the video. Now, starting with Bitcoin. So over the past 24 hours, we've actually seen Bitcoin cool off slightly after a really strong run earlier in the week. Now, this isn't actually anything too concerning just yet, but in fact, I'd actually argue that Bitcoin is holding up incredibly well considering everything that's happening globally. For example, yesterday at 4 a.m., let me show you. So as you can see, we've been getting these big bursts of bullish movements. You can see at about 4 a.m., massive movement for the upside. So pretty much moved from a price range of 62,900 all the way up to 63,890, so nearly 64k. Then obviously you can see we were making those higher highs. We were still bullish, coming up to 64.1k, and then literally today at about 3 o'clock, 64.5k and above. That is crazy. And now at the US market open, we are seeing even more bullish movement. So Bitcoin has actually been holding up very, very nicely. This is yesterday's trade setup that we had. You can see we had the move from the upside towards this downside area. Then we had this wedge pattern. We then slightly dipped into this supply zone, rejected, and then continued even deeper. So we actually did come in for a short trade around, I believe, this area of about 63.1k, and we actually did make some pretty nice profits. So yeah, if you guys are looking, then make sure to join next session. So let's carry on with that Bitcoin talk. So pretty much normally when the markets become nervous, then Bitcoin tends to experience much larger pullbacks than we're seeing right now. Obviously, these past couple of days, we saw more escalation in the Middle East, and to be fair, we didn't actually see too much movement for the downside, which is actually very strange. I'm not gonna lie. I was actually expecting much more of a pullback, but we didn't get it, which is very, very interesting. So instead, buyers actually continue stepping in every time we see a dip, which tells me that there's actually still plenty of confidence in the market. I kind of had the gut feeling that we are gonna be still bullish, but I don't know. It was a difficult decision to make. Kind of looking at the market sentiment, obviously escalation is continuing, outflows are starting to kind of appear, but then we're still looking good for this upside. Very strange movement, not gonna lie. So pretty much the key thing that traders are actually watching right now is whether Bitcoin can continue holding the important supporting levels. So if buyers actually keep defending this area, then we could simply be seeing a healthy consolidation before the next move higher. But however, if support starts breaking down, then we could see a deeper pullback before continuing the larger trend. So for now, I think Bitcoin is actually looking relatively strong. I'd like to know what you guys think. Let me know down below. Now, the biggest reason behind today's slow price action actually isn't crypto itself. It's the macroeconomic uncertainty. So the more specifically, it's actually the investors are actually paying closer attention to the latest developments involving United States and Iran. So whenever geopolitical tensions increase, markets usually become more cautious like we've seen previously. Investors coming outside of those riskier assets and putting their capital and investments into something safer, for example, gold. So when we obviously saw kind of the war situation at its high, we obviously saw the massive inflows, Bitcoin taking moves to the downsides, 58k, those critical levels. And now that we're seeing inflows, the situation's got a little bit better, but now the situation's getting a little bit more heated, but at the same time, we're not seeing what we saw those weeks ago when the situation was kind of really hot. So since actually Bitcoin has been trading much more like a technology growth asset over the past couple of years, that means that it's also feeling some of that pressure. And now the interesting part about all this is that despite these headlines, Bitcoin hasn't completely fallen apart. So it's actually remained relatively stable compared to what many traders actually expected. Like we mentioned before, we actually did think, obviously, the Bitcoin price was going to come to about 50, 55K, maybe even lower, but that's not what happened at all. So that resilience is actually something I'll definitely be keeping an eye on over the next coming days. Now, before we jump into the next update, I quickly want to talk to you guys about Evedex. Now, if you've been looking for a way to practice trading without risking huge amount of your own capital, they've recently introduced something really interesting called funded trading. So for a 50 USD entry, you can actually access a 1,500 USD funded trading account. And one of the standout features is that it comes with 0% profit share. So that's meaning that you keep everything that you make. Now, on top of that, they do actually have prize pools that you can all compete in, plus some completely free courses that you can actually have a look at. We've also obviously got the experience courses. It comes from personal branding to affiliate marketing to TikTok to Instagram to YouTube. Obviously there's demo lessons in there as well, but for that small fee you can access everything. We've got general finance, personal branding, so much more to have a look at. So if that's something you guys are actually interested in, then definitely check that link down in the description below. Or even better, come and join one of our next live streaming sessions where I'll walk you guys through everything that we've got going on step by step and answer any questions that you may have. So of course, if there's anything you're unsure about, do obviously feel free to drop a comment down below and I'll break everything down. Now, let's get back to the market update. And now another story that's actually been making some very nice headlines recently is involving Michael Saylor and strategy. So for years, Saylor became famous for saying that the company would essentially never sell any of its Bitcoin. Now, recently, we've actually started to see strategy sell relatively small portions of their crypto holdings. So what's actually important is understanding why. And this isn't simply because they've lost confidence in Bitcoin itself. Instead, the company has actually been using some of those sales to help manage liquidity and meet certain financial obligations. So compared to the enormous amount of Bitcoin they still own, these sales are actually very, very small. For example, a couple of days ago, they sold about 3K plus in Bitcoin. And that also created a little bit of a panic because previously, when they sold Bitcoin, we saw a massive move for the downside. And it was actually a very, very crazy scenario from shifting to the fact that we're never going to sell Bitcoin to this is the first time we've sold Bitcoin, everything's going crazy, there's a big, big change, and everyone's thinking, that's it, Bitcoin's going to absolutely dump. But that's actually not what we've seen in these couple of days. Now, it has actually changed the narrative slightly, but investors are now actually asking whether strategy may need to continue selling Bitcoin in the future, especially if market conditions can actually become more difficult. But personally, I don't actually think this changes the long-term story for Bitcoin. So it is actually definitely something worth monitoring because strategy has become one of the most biggest corporate holders of Bitcoin anywhere in the world right now. So where do we actually go from here? Now for me, there are actually three things that I'm really watching right now. Firstly, if any further developments happen between the US and Iran. If tensions continue escalating, markets will actually remain pretty volatile. Now secondly, I'm watching whether Bitcoin can continue to hold these key support levels. So if buyers remain active, then that would be another positive sign for the overall trend. And finally, institutional demand. We're continuing to see interest from larger investors, and if ETF inflows continue improving, that could provide another strong catalyst for Bitcoin over the coming weeks. Overall, I still think Bitcoin looks relatively healthy, and yes, we've got a short-term uncertainty, and yes, the markets are reacting to geopolitical headlines, but when you zoom out and actually have a look at the bigger picture, the overall trend hasn't really shifted fully. Now, as always, that's everything from me today in the market update. So if you found this video useful, make sure to leave a like because it really helps the channel out. Now, subscribe if you're new because we are actually covering crypto markets every single week and making sure you guys stay up to date with everything that's actually happening. So let me know down in the comments below what you guys think will happen next. And do you think that Bitcoin continues to push for new highs, or are we due to a bigger correction first? I genuinely love to hear about what you guys think. So thank you all very much for watching. I really appreciate every single one of you, and I'll see you all in the next video.